Helicon West. It is so good to see you. We are here for Rob Carney tonight, and you're in for a treat because, boy, those of you who were at his reading today at 1:30 in Library 101, yeah, they're fist bumping right now. Yeah, we got to see him. And he's doing something different tonight, and so, yeah, treats abound. I'm Star Coulbrooke. I am the former Logan City Poet Laureate, so I call myself the LPL Emerita. And I am here to give a little bit of an introduction of Rob, and I'm going to MC the open mic, and boy, have we got some great poets and writers here for you tonight in the open mic section, so that's going to be good. And I want to just say that if you come to Helicon West, miraculous things may happen to you. For instance, Kat Farrell, thanks to the Logan Library and Kat Farrell for providing the space and being our partners. Thank you, Kat. Kat Farrell was just at the League of Utah Writers Conference, and she won third place in a children's book chapter, and she placed, that winning was for all genres, not children's books, but everything. And also, Phillip Brown, who's here tonight, read for us one night, and a quite famous literary magazine person was here and said, hey, I want his work, and now he's published there. What is the name of the literary magazine, Phillip?
Psaltery and Lyre.
Psaltery and Lyre. It's a pretty fantastic thing to be published in. And tell us what else happened.
Oh, that after it got published, then it got nominated for inclusion in an anthology. So fingers crossed, we'll see if it gets in.
Woo! So that's what happens to you when you come to Helicon West. Okay. I would like to introduce to you my friend Rob Carney. He's an English professor at Utah Valley University. He lives in Salt Lake City. Rob, do you live on the avenues?
No. Closer to Sugar House.
Well, oh yeah, Sugar House. That's good. That's a desirable place to live in Salt Lake City. You can become quite inspired if you live in that area. And now this all may seem ordinarily literary, but Rob is also a two-time winner of the Utah Book Award for Poetry. His latest full-length collection is Book of Sharks, in which we're drawn to strangeness, to moments of wonder, to a deeper search for meaning and motivation. In 88 Maps, his 2015 collection, he shows us how to find our way around the New West, how to live in its physical and metaphysical suburbs. It asks us to look at the times, places, and wildness we should say yes to. It asks us to look at our real and figurative cul-de-sacs and say no. It's a collection of praise songs, many essays, and challenges to rampant development. There's a great podcast interview on it by the poet J.P. Dancing Bear. 5 other books and chapbooks by our poet. 3 are here. 3 titles are here to entice you tonight. Story Problems, Weather Report, and this is One Sexy Planet. He has 4 new books coming out. Facts and Figures, Call and Response. Those are both poetry. Another poetry, The Last Tiger Is Somewhere, is co-written with a friend of his. He'll might talk about that tonight. Accidental Gardens, a book of essays about the environment, poetics, and politics. Yeah, come on in. It's free. We've got somebody very interested in coming in to join us. Okay. Hi, come on in. Okay, once when Rob was figuring out a set for a reading we invited him to do, he emailed me to say, I mapped out a tentative set list, right? But the baby likes drawing and reached it off the desk, you know. Anyway, it's never set in stone, so if you have not requests exactly, but prequests in exactly, I'm happy to work those in. And by the way, that baby just got his driver's license, so we've known Rob for a while. And so, Rob has been published in dozens of prestigious journals. He does blogs and podcasts and reviews and interviews. He gets around. He's appeared at Helicon West 3 times in 2011, 2015 and 2016, always to great acclaim by our audiences, and you'll see why. But before I let him come on, I want to tell you that you should come to Helicon West next time, because Danny Dubrasky, who our Teresa studied under, great poet, is coming to Helicon West. This is on September 26th right here. I also want to tell you that our new Logan City Poet Laureate, Shannon Fallon, is going to be reading in Library 101 on campus Monday, September 30th at 3:30, and you do not want to miss that one. Don't miss that one. You'll be sorry if you do, Rob. You're going to have to drive back up again to see Shannon. Okay, so you will surely want to see Rob again. We'll invite him back again because we like him. He's pretty fantastic. And here he is. Welcome him. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks to the people for coming. I'm going to start with something called Poetic Justice. It is a revenge story. Actually, not just a revenge story, a time-traveling revenge story, beginning in 2016. Poetic Justice. This happened on November 9th in Salt Lake City, on the corner of 500 North and Morton Drive, a spot that used to be in Mexico, and before that, a tribal footpath, crossing from the mountains to 1 million migratory birds. Rewind from there, and you'll see mastodons. Mastodons sensing that the air has changed. No spring on the way with its snowmelt grasses, or violets coming like the earth's best secret. Violets they've been waiting all winter to eat. Walk it back more, and it's the home of crabs, sideways stepping through tide pools, the corner of 5th North and Morton on the inland sea. It helps to remember. Anyway, after the ballots were counted, a Somali girl walking to school, 5th grade, her head and hair covered as always, was happy about her teacher, or noticing the weather, or thinking that burnt toast smelled too familiar, like that Red Cross ambulance hit by a mortar. When the crossing guard, holding his sign out, said, "Enjoy your free flight back to the jungle." I don't know what her backpack weighed, but carrying that moment around all day, and in her memory forever, probably felt like shouldering a broken moon. Though that's not the end of the story, because a dire wolf, long extinct, but not today, turned that white man into red screaming, throat gone first, then his liver, then part of a thigh. He resurrected. He had no memory of being eaten. He stood in the crosswalk feeling accomplished, like a star. Then the ghost of Shakespeare appeared. He was looking for a half-wit to cast as Polonius. "Step behind this curtain," he said. "I need to see if you're stabbable." Turned out he was. The crossing guard came back from the dead, this time facing a firing squad. He'd insulted the daughter of a hacienda owner, and a nun planting corn at the orphanage, and women from Syria, Somalia, from Bosnia, Cambodia, from Poland and Ireland, and fleeing the Confederate South. He'd insulted the trees who'd heard him, and the future for being in its history. And even the ore taken out of a mountain, then heated and shaped into the shovel head waiting nearby. When he stood up, lit by the morning, the bison stampeding him were beautiful, as if the mountains had decided to run downhill and out across the valley. His dying thought while lying there, a bird's nest of compound fractures, was, where the hell did those buffalo come from? But that was wrong. Buffalo are in Asia. His face was in the dirt. He stood up quickly and got to his feet. His clothes weren't even dusty. It was post-election Wednesday near Meadowlark Elementary, and all the kids from the neighborhood were headed his way. He didn't much care for the black girl's hijab, said, "Enjoy your free flight back to the jungle." But instead of sidewalks or African forests, there was water, an inland sea. At the surface above him were silhouettes, kids' windmill arms and legs kicking. It would have been nice to do that too, but he couldn't swim. He resurrects again, unaware of drowning, and a flock of ocean liners flies across the sky, sounding impossible, like Salvador Dali painting with thunder, a painting titled Migratory Birds. Somehow, the huge ships misjudge the distance, drop anchor, and veer on their wings 2 miles before the lake, skid down atop the crossing guard, barnacled hulls and concrete, and him in between. Something quiet flutters now, in the shadow cast by one of them. It's a red and white fabric sign on a stick. It says, "Stop."
Yeah.
So, earlier today at the university, I shared a couple of fractured fairy tales, like a take Humpty Dumpty, style fairy tales and throw them on the ground and then put them back together a new way. And so I'll do one of those that I did not do earlier. This one's called The Ugly Duckling. You know the Hans Christian Andersen. I like these because you don't have to actually back up and explain, well, this is a story about blah, blah, blah. People just know this one, correct? The Ugly Duckling. And I think of it as kind of an antidote to the first poem. What happens in the next generation? When the ducklings of this one have grown up knowing swans are swans, and the sun doesn't care about whose feathers, and the pond has no opinion about whose feet come paddling, what kind or color they are. This is where the story should jump cut to an old duck quacking through a microphone and seeing the backs of its audience moving on, just wakes in the water. Geese fly over in their own V, leaving, so gratefully out of earshot. Even the wind's in a rush to be out of there and gone. Probably, though, there's at least one person who's thinking, yes, but what about my love needs? I thought poets had advice about love. I don't know if it's advice, but there is this. This is called Because Summer Has 14 Kinds of Orange. Because summer has 14 kinds of orange, I want to see you catch this frisbee. But you're standing too close to the cliff edge and might fall off and forgot to take your flying lessons. In the future, you thought, they'll invent new air, something kind of spongy, so if you fall, you just bounce back again, like anti-gravity yoga, the phoenix pose, the morning slinky. And I don't know, you're probably right about that. It makes sense. But I can't help wishing that you'd listen, and sometimes put on your flying costume. I know a few places where it might be fun to soar. And this one's called Because All Orcas Have a Way with Words. I'm just going to pause for a second to make sure. I'm originally from the Northwest, Puget Sound, Orcas. Is there anybody in here who does not know? They're the black and white ones in the, okay. Orcas. Because all orcas have a way with words. Because all orcas have a way with words, decoding their 10,000 whistles is a lot of fun. We sail out with microphones, plunk them in the water, then listen as they badmouth dolphins, complain about squid, their cheaters camouflage, and that candy-ass getaway ink squirt maneuver. No respect for the food chain. They click and move on. Gone beyond our audio range. Their word for bikini is seaweed. For fishing boat, it's wants too many. But their name for themselves is impossible to translate. Something like more than wild appetite, or it takes more than salmon to be full. All right, so speaking of the ocean, I have a new book called The Book of Sharks. It's, I guess, technically only new-ish, because it's just about a year old now. But new in the news, I guess, because it did win the Utah Book Award recently. So, this book of sharks is not two covers around individual poems. Really, I see it as a book-length collection of one poem, right? One long poem composed of 7 movements, each one of the movements containing 7 parts. So, rather than just pick and choose randomly from here and there, I'm going to do one of the movements. And it would make sense maybe to do the first, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do the 5th. I'm going to do the 5th movement. It's a movement called Bones, and I've got 3 reasons that I want to do this one as opposed to, say, the opening section. One, Starr mentioned my friend Scott Poole. It's his favorite of the sections, which is nice. It doesn't mean it's going to be yours, but it is his, and it's always nice to do something that you know somebody likes. Second is that this section won the Robinson Jeffers Award for Poetry, which was a big deal to me. I mean, maybe it is to everybody, but to me it was. I always, since I started reading poems really at 18, loved Robinson Jeffers, and I wanted to go to this house called Tor House that he built himself out of stones that he rolled up from the beach. It's a home right there in Carmel, and you can think, oh sure, but he was probably a mason or a builder or a carpenter. He was none of those things. He had gone to the University of Washington and graduated with a degree in forestry, and then he'd gone to med school at USC and had his MD, and then he ditched all people completely, and he and his wife Una went as far away as possible from all of them. And at that time, Carmel was very rural, almost no people around. So this guy, he builds his own house, and he doesn't build his own house, he builds rock walls to separate his wife Una's gardens, and he builds next to his house Hawk Tower, right? And it really was a tower. And it had stairs on the inside and also a secret kind of inner passageway up to the top where he could sit and look out at nothing between him and this stone bench he'd built into it and the Pacific Ocean. And winning this prize meant that I got to go there to do a reading, which is a place I'd wanted to go just as a pilgrim. So this was even better, right? I was invited on purpose. I was shown the grounds. I got to sit at the top of this thing. It was very cool. So that's the second reason I like this. And then the third is because this section begins with a genealogy. And in no other state that I have been in to read from this book do people know as much about genealogies as Utah, right? So those are the 3 reasons. This is a section from the Book of Sharks called Bones. The cousin of a shark is a manta ray, and the cousin of a manta ray, a hawk. And the cousin of a hawk is lightning, the ocean reborn, returned skyward and alive with storm. And the cousin of storms is a waterfall, and the cousin of falling is the wind. And the cousin of wind is erosion, leaving rock, the bones of the mountains scattered. And the cousin of the mountains is a row of teeth, and another behind. And those teeth are the cousin of the manta ray, lightning, the wind. In a story seldom remembered, sharks were ghosts, guarding the afterlife, since their rendered bodies had no skeletons, just teeth. The shock of that discovery must have added new verses to songs and widened the net of old omens, but nobody knows. Those details aren't the details that lasted, only this. The dead step out of their bodies, walk down to the sea, swim out to the horizon. For some, the passage is easy. A day, a night, a warm current there to guide them. For others, the journey goes on and on. If they killed a bear, or left a wolf's mate howling, and the water is cold as a shark's eyes. And then they see the fins. Under the first full moon of summer, they would carry bowls of water, the light reflecting on the surface, making more, a procession of moons moving forward. In the center of town was a rowboat being filled one bowl at a time. And this was the boat of anyone lost at sea, gone without a burial. Those in mourning floated candles and petals. There may have been music on flute or strings, but we don't know. It's a ritual fallen away, and all we have left are the wives' tales. They say they're empty bowls filled with quieter sorrow, and with memories of the dead to carry home. They say the boat would be gone come sunrise, just the anchor there, still as a headstone, by others from the years before. We have one such anchor on display in the museum. Arrangements of fishhooks, even spears tipped long ago with shark's teeth, and figure that's that. Think the past fits into our pockets. We wander about, then buy a barcode souvenir. But the past is more like the wind behind us, and the present more like a ship. Then the only pockets on a ship that matter are the sails. And they're wrong about the skeletons, apart from the age of the bones. Bones buried deep, but seated upright together, all of them facing the sea. So the ancient world believed in guardian spirits watching over the living, and a salmon was placed with the deceased to keep each spirit fed. Fish bones wrapped in deerskin were discovered in every grave. A plausible explanation, but it's wrong. The living were playing the part of angels, guiding the dead to the edge of heaven, seating them upright to find forever in the waves. But what about the salmon? Well, that's counterclockwise too. The salmon were meant as an offering, a present for the sharks, a thank you for taking our spirits into their home. Spearing a shark means 7 days of work, that long to do the rendering. And all you get is a set of jaws and teeth, some fragment to hang in a window, or look at over the fireplace instead of at the fire. I've heard there are monks somewhere using human skulls as paperweights. Not to keep old scrolls from rolling up, or pages in place while they bind them, but to bear in mind we aren't the measure of creation, just a part. The edge of the sea is a teacher. So many bones. All the shells and the sand dollars, all the barnacles encrusted on the pier, even wood. It used to stand upright in forests, even ash left behind in our fire pits dug to keep warm, to boil water and empty our crab pots. Even steam rising up like the spirit of rivers, joining clouds that drift above our graveyards. And higher still, the moon keeps sailing through its phases, all of them the color of bone. All right. Is there, Nate, are you here? Yeah, all right. I'm going to do one more poem and then I want to pause. I actually have two. I'm going to split them up. I'm going to do this one because Nate liked it. All right? And then I'm going to see if people want to have a conversation, ask me questions, things like that. And then one more at the end. But, okay, so this one is from my book, 88 Maps. And you got to imagine that it's a list with the actual numbers, right, enumerated, 1 through 10, like commandments. And this is me helping politicians who need help. All right? It's a poem called Suggestions for Urban Renewal. I see you've got a lot of urban renewal happening this way, right? Walmart and other things. Suggestions for urban renewal. 1, a no umbrellas ordinance. Instead of poking holes in the rain, people should have to wear hats. 2, let's take away hats while we're at it. Make everyone risk being sexy. A woman with gray sky eyes, for instance, hair darker, the ends of it curling. 3, one rainy day on Grafton Street, I waited out the weather drinking tea. This was Dublin, so I needed a second pot. Then a third with a girl who'd noticed my accent. 4, a short walk from there to the National Gallery. We outran the next burst of rain. Kandinsky, Chagall, of course, the Renaissance in marble, and her face still flushed from the cold and the running. A drop, she hadn't yet blinked from her lashes. 5, then she showed me, I didn't even know he had a brother, a room full of paintings by Jack Yates. 6, they were amazing. 7, like rain at night on a metal roof, or watching a storm from a wide front porch. Or 8, maybe just red umbrellas, some color to contrast the overcast. 9, a retail anchor's not the answer. 10, a new Target's not where people fall in love. All right, let me take a little break here and see, are there questions, things that people want to ask or say?
What what cafes in Salt Lake do you have?
It used to exclusively be Sugar House Coffee, right? And that was even despite the unfortunate relocation to a worse place, right? It used to be right next to a place called Blue Boutique, and then it got moved across, and now it's behind the vacuum store. Anyway, yes, usually that one. I also lived very close to Alchemy Coffee. I don't know if people know this one. This is on 17th South, away from other places, right? It's just a little spot in a neighborhood, right? So it's 400 East, 1700 South, Alchemy Coffee. But I don't always write in coffee shops anymore. A lot of times I find that I'm kind of anchored at home, and so if I cannot do it there, then it doesn't get done. Yeah. If you're over there, by the way, Sugar House Coffee or Alchemy, and this is on YouTube, and you think this counts for something, you could send me a gift certificate as thanks. That would be great. Are there other questions? Yeah.
I'm just very impressed with having all of this by memory, and I was curious if that's like how memorization or the performance of the poem, like how that factors into your writing, or like I don't know. I find that intriguing, and I'm wondering if you could say more about that.
Well, I think that because I had things memorized that sort of, I think, backwalked me into the oral tradition, and, which is where I probably should have been in the first place. But of course, you grow up, even though you grow up hearing things read to you, once you are able to read yourself, you just sort of forget the out loud part of it, right? And I think the out loud part of it matters tons. I mean, it shouldn't be different for us now, should it, than it used to be for everybody before the 20th century, right? So I think I wound up backing up into the oral tradition, and as a result of that, I think that I started to write in old forms. And that's actually, it works out pretty well, because I think that everybody recognizes the old forms, whether it's an origin story or a fable or a myth or along those lines. Now, we don't usually get up anymore thinking, okay, now what's that one about the fox and the grapes? That will be my guide for today, right? I mean, we know these stories and then we leave them behind. And even though we don't spend our lives each day thinking about origin stories as a way to sort of like govern what we do and decide and feel existentially, when somebody comes along and gives you that old form that you recognize with brand new story or information in it, I think it's like a shortcut to people sort of willingness or happiness about listening, right? When we encounter an old thing with new information in it, we are usually patient for the 2 minutes that it takes to learn the new thing, right? So yes, memory started first, back up into the oral tradition, and then I like being there, right? I know that other people do not, but that's fine. They'll do their thing and I'll do mine. Yeah?
Did you mention you read too in your early?
Oh, sure. Wasn't everybody?
I was.
On the night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, his mother called him Wild Thing, and he said, "I'll eat you up." So she sent him to bed without eating anything, right? I mean, yes, or thank you, Sam, I am. I mean, that's like one of the most heartfelt things I could think of, more so than a 4.5-hour zoom up close to Frodo's blue crying eyes in the adaptation of Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, those kinds of things, they really make an imprint. And I think that if you read to young people, they really like these things, right? And if you read to them when they're very young, something like there's a rocket in my pocket, is there a Zamp in the lamp? And the kids will really look. I don't see a Zamp, right? There's a Zlop behind the clock. And they will look, right? I mean, there's something very, very captivating. And books seem like the authoritative source, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what your advice is for young writers, for people who are just starting out.
My advice for them? Well, I guess that you need to be patient, right? And it's never been the case with anybody that I know of that suddenly you become like movie star famous. If those are the things you're going for, then all right. But chances are if you're going to become movie star famous, it's because you're just super good looking, and then you don't need to hear any advice from me because you're super good looking, right? I mean, what else do you really need? But for young writers starting out, I would say the same thing all the time. Yes, it's very thrilling to be expressive, all right? But that this is also a craft, and that sometimes what you have to be willing to do is acquire the patience and the discipline to wait, right? And that if you look at something that you're very enthusiastic about right now, in 2 months, you might think, oh, and you can be more objective at that point, and go back and make whatever kind of changes in the way of clarity are needed or anything else. Of course, waiting 2 months is a really long time. It's hard to wait 2 months. So don't start off, and you're also sometimes on the clock. There's something due. It's going to be due by the end of the semester. What he told me? He told me not to wait until. No, so shorten that by what I said, to a week, right, or a weekend. But if you can get a little objective distance, and the only way to do that is time, right? Oh, and the other thing too is maybe a reduction of ego, because it is easier to see things if you're not invested in. God, I'm great, right? Other things? Yeah.
Can you just talk about a few of the poets that you really looked up to that guided you in learning to write?
Well, I mentioned Robinson Jeffers, but he was not alive, right? I mean, so I looked up to him, as somebody that I was reading. And I mentioned my friend Scott Poole. I looked up to him too. He has some skills that I don't, right? And that there are things that I've done. I thought, Scott will like this, right? There was also a poet and a professor and an editor in Washington named David Wagner, and he came to Spokane where I was working on my MFA. And based on his writing and based on what he said about being the editor of a journal called Poetry Northwest and his editorial policy, and talking to him a little bit afterwards, I just thought, I want to be good enough to send things and have him put them in his magazine. And so that was an early test for me, and he did frequently. I mean, and if he didn't, then I imagined, well, he's right, this is not done, and I have to get back to work. Others, I mean, I really love Anne Sexton's stuff. more than Sylvia Plath. And I know she's more famous, but I think it's just notoriety kind of fame because she committed suicide more flamboyantly and first. We therefore think Sylvia Plath's, you know, it. Whereas I think Anne Sexton is really unbelievably good, right? That kind of thing. And those are just the ones that write in English first. I've also found poets that I like translated from other languages. There's a guy named Tomasz Solomon. He had a poem called History, and the first line of it was, "I was born in a wheat field snapping my fingers." I just thought, I like that, right? And at one point in the same poem he says, "I was throwing my gloves into thorn bushes." And I thought, that's brilliant too, because you know what you're going to need to have on in order to reach in the thorns and get those gloves? So that's the end of work, right there, you know, mission accomplished. So joyfully, you know, so I like Timm, and there's a guy named Vasco Popa, and I really like Timm, especially because he wrote in series, right? Not just one idea, one page, but in series, and I do that too, right? So that was affirmative, that you have the permission to do what you want to do because other people older than you were doing it, you know, so that meant you got to if that was your way. Yeah.
I've been to a few of your workshops and seen you teach, and you're also a very good teacher.
Oh, thank you.
You really are. And I'm just wondering, does your career as a teacher influence your poetry, and how does it influence your poetry?
Well, I'm sure that it does, but I'm not always positive I know exactly when and exactly why. You know, I think that getting to be a professor or even a high school teacher, especially if you're doing things like AP English, you know, means you get to spend, you're required, in fact, not get, it is assigned to you that you must read good stuff and then go places with people and talk to them about it, right? And there, if you want to be a writer, I would think that that's a better way probably to immerse yourself than in some of the other jobs I've had. I'll give you an example. I worked the Harvest Rush in Enumclaw, Washington at Farman's Pickles on the graveyard shift. My job, and this was because of OSHA compliance, was to stack the boxes coming through the sealer on the pallet until it was full, and then my friend who got me the job came over with a forklift laughing at me and drove them away to put in the warehouse with a truck. And so that was 9 minutes, right? And then the next 9 minutes, by OSHA regulations, otherwise you're going to blow your back out in a week, is that I had to wait. So there was really a two-person job. And so for the next 9 minutes, I sat on an overturned bucket, and that's too boring to stand, right? 9 minutes of that. So I brought Patrick McManus's short stories. He's a humor writer about the outdoors. They shoot canoes, don't they? And I would read a little bit of that until it was my turn to stack again, right? Now that's a way I found as a coping mechanism for boredom to bring, you know, words writing to my job. But nobody else did, and they thought it was kind of nuts that I was bringing books, right? Until on break, they're all saying, well, can I have a turn? Can I see that? What's so funny about that? So this thing becomes this laughter baton, right? But in this case, if you're a college professor or a high school teacher of literature, well, then you don't even have to manufacture reasons. You just get to it. I'm sure that the one informs the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? One more, maybe? Okay, no. Then I'll end with this thing, which is called Coyote's Daughter, Raven's Son. I just want to make sure, in case there are people who are from neither the Northwest nor the Southwest, shapeshifter characters. They probably exist for everybody in one way or another, but in Southwest it's Coyote, in the Northwest it's Raven, and this is called Coyote's Daughter, Raven's Son. The poem is a shapeshifter animal, a trickster. 1 minute, it's a sailfish. The next, it's a hook. One night, it's an alley cat, urgent to get you outdoors, get you on the fire escape and screaming. Another, it sleeps. I remember there was a great migration, poems soaring home. And I remember, too, when they used to thunder like trains, crushing the grass. I watched as the herd turned into crickets, then rain, then into kids in the backyard running for the house before the raindrops turned into hail. And while I watched, I smelled my dinner burning. Clever trick. Well, what's the good in that? Not much. Then what the hell's it want? I don't know. To astonish, like leaves do in autumn. To hope, I guess, it says one small thing that lasts.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
See what I said? The bones of shark, the soul of salmon, the spirit of rivers. Thanks, Rob. That was. Oh, we have open mic. Don't leave, because boy, do we have some good open mic readers for you tonight, because I saw some of them signing up, but I have to go get the sign-up sheets. Hold on. And I should have said at the beginning that Rob has a couple of books back there to sell. He takes cash or checks. I've tried to talk him into getting a cell phone and doing the like little card swipe thing, doing the Venmo or whatever. But, you know, he's Rob. part of why we like him so much. Open mic readers. Ronald Jensen is first. And then Jay Paine, and then Kendall Becker. And I'll stand up and introduce the next three. Come on up, Ron.
Hi.
Hi, Ron.
From the Dewey decimal system. The zeros are general works with mistakes and facts. The 100s are the big periods, each speech sound, each word lacks. The 200s are on religion, and mythology too. 300s are on holidays, fairy tales, and manners you can do. The 400s are on dictionaries, and the way that we talk. The 500s are on sciences, like animals and rocks. 600s are on tame animals, machines of all sorts. 700s are on the arts, like drawing and sports. The 800s are on jokes and poems and plays. 900s are on geography and the history of past days. These are biographies of people we adore. This is my Dewey poem. I hope I taught you more. The poem goes, look at that guy looking at me. He has nice eyes for me to see. He has a nice smile, I'll tell you this. Sometimes I feel like giving him a kiss. He has a nice shirt, he has nice shoes. But I haven't so. What's the use? For the two of us, my life won't feature. Trying to student and he's a teacher. Thank you.
Hello, I have a short poem that I wrote a little while ago. It's called The Last Dance. Last night was sunshine, and with our fingers intertwined, we danced, like dazzling rays of light across the sky, swift as a kite. But soon our connection would sever, for a song cannot sound forever. Notes fade into a canvas of silence and melt over the misty horizon. The last morsel of sunlight did fade, I know, By you, I've been betrayed. No consideration, you took but a glance, but thanks for saving the last dance.
Hi, Kendall.
So this is a short piece that I've been working on for a few years, and it was preceded by an idea that I had about two friends, a man and a woman who are very close, and they decided to correspond just by telephone, but to not speak during those conversations, and instead afterwards to write down the conversations they imagined they'd had. After doing this for many years, they decide to meet in person and exchange manuscripts. And they learn that the woman's manuscript is filled with dialogue, and the man's is completely blank. At first, the woman was hurt by this and didn't understand. So when I sat down to write that story, this is the one that came out. It's called Meditation. When my friend tells me he's going on a silent meditation retreat for 10 days, I'm immediately jealous. What does that retreat have that I don't? He and I barely talk as it is. We live 3 time zones away and occasionally write each other 2 short emails. Talking on the phone happens, but it is an ordeal, no one wanting to inconvenience the other. Let me know when a good time is for you, and so on. I consider that maybe he requires the formality of the retreat to escape the chatter of other friends. I wonder how many days will go by before he'll want to say something, to anyone, to himself. How many days until his throat muscles begin to atrophy, reducing his range of expression? What if he feels that he communicates exactly what he intends through silence? He promises to call when he gets back. Yes, that would be convenient, I say. I consider the importance of the 10-day interval. If he feels like talking is the thing he wants to wean himself off of, what if I use his determination to motivate my own personal improvement? I think about several of my bad habits, hereditary coping mechanisms for anxiety, my obsession with smooth skin, and the public removal of any wayward, partially attached dermal tissue. I could choose to not do that for 10 days, and when the call comes, I could report. Derek, so great to hear from you. But before you start, let me tell you about my own 10-day journey. Day 1. I don't adhere to my pledge. It isn't even close. I had officially given up on it the night before, even though giving up might even imply too much commitment. Day 2. I honestly don't really think about the retreat. I'm at work, camping with my fellow field techs in the national park where we gather forest inventory data for 10 hours a day. And when I'm not eating or feeling tired, I am preoccupied with my need to read an informational packet for a tutoring side job I'm planning to start in the fall. Day 3. I run, I work, I read. I play music. Next day, day 4. I sit by the fire. I'm invited to assess the blow-up mattress of an Italian intern who is working with us for the summer. I assess that mattress. Day 5. I look through numerous 18-gallon totes of unrefrigerated food at our campsite, hoping to find some edible leftover I can use as a substrate for an entire avocado. What I find is a Tupperware of sour noodles. I tell no one and put it back where it had been. Day 6, rain. Day 7, I receive a promotional text message from my wireless service provider. Day 8, we fry corn tortillas in butter, melt cheese on them, and fill them with rice, corn, beans, and fresh guacamole. Day 9. I find myself offering to drive the carpool to town again. The Italian intern and another young man with nothing important to do are in my car. Their presence means I can't do what I would prefer, which is to listen carefully to the same song on repeat for the 45-minute commute. So I opt for exposure to new material. We listen to weird Italian pop reggae fusion, then a modern jazz piece about having something in common with another person. I can't deny that the vocalist is beyond gifted. With effortless facility, she repeatedly transforms a nothing lyric into something worth listening to. But soon I find myself trapped in my car, listening to an extended scat solo, and I begin to seriously consider the merits of Italian pop reggae fusion. Finally, we arrive and go into this cafe. The bathroom has old-fashioned pictures on the wall and a vase of fake roses. Usually I enjoy sitting in there, soaking up a few minutes of peaceful isolation. But this time I can't relax. I need to send an email about an offer I received for a highly desirable job. But I can't get it together. The internet isn't working for one, but I couldn't even begin the draft. Thank you for thinking of me. I'm very interested in this position. I am distracted by our Italian intern who is outside smoking. We had talked about a tentative plan to camp somewhere, just the two of us, but I sensed that he would never consent to the logistics. Do we take both tents or just one tent? It's a pain to pack up our homes. So, excuse me, how do you feel about fucking in the back of my car? I think it will take about 90 minutes, considering the commute and any residual desire to cuddle. But it turns out that determining whether he has any condoms is irrelevant, because he flat out says he wants to rest this weekend. Seriously. I sit there for a second. Okay, I say. Let me make the grocery list for the group meal we're in charge of, while you continue to text on your phone. Day 10. We all cram into the cab of our work truck to watch a movie about a genius programmer who makes sex dolls for himself. In the end, the dolls kill the programmer and the top doll escapes. I'm psyched about female power until I realize that the programmer was using them to beat his physical body at chess and experience the ultimate egotistical elation he was striving for as the second doll plugged his chest with a kitchen knife. When Derek calls, I press the green telephone button. And I listen to the silence on the other end.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thanks, Kendall. Next we have Phillip Brown, Kaleen Fox, and Isaac Timm.
So I'm going to read 3 poems tonight. This first one is titled After Rain, and it's my obsession with reflections in all kinds of places, but I used to live in Oregon, and so there was a lot of rain, and I was just thinking about puddles and the strange reversed upside down world that's in puddles, and so that's a lot of where this imagery comes from. After rain, streets brim with mirrors. Walking through town, I peer into a world reversed. Leafless trees reach down for clouds, like roots seeking water, or nets lowered to catch the robins flying chest up in aerial backstrokes. A roof tip points to the orange sky darkening as the sun floats higher, then disappears behind a fence. Street lamps hang below, glowing up onto half-lit houses like footlights on a stage. And the moon drops into dusk like a coin in a fountain, slow motion, enough time for a whole history of wishes. I step closer to find another version of myself hinged underfoot, like a shadow, staring back, my expression shifting between disappointment and wonder. This next poem was written about an experience that I had. I attended a like a solitary retreat at a monastery that's in Oregon called Mount Angel Abbey. And it was a very windy day and evening spent there. And there was a lot that I was pondering, and so that all kind of came out into this 3-part poem. It's called Retreat. 1. I'm not sure what to pray for or how in this bare room with a crucifix. The trees, at least, have bowed all day in the wind, renouncing gold like monks. The Holy Ghost haunts my cracked window, trailing in the scent of rain and sounds of vespers, faint as if from some farther place. I read Rilke's Book of Hours by lamplight. He says the dark embraces everything, shapes and shadows, just as they are. I switch off the light and it's true. My body, baptized by nightfall, becomes part of that silence, like the bell at rest or the new moon hidden in the sky. 2. Morning sketches the room back into detail. Bible, chair, a writing desk. I'm tired of borrowed things, homesick in a house of faith that isn't mine. I remake the bed as asked, gather up the sheets like an armful of scattered papers. The fresh linens provided unfold like books, blank pages, pale blue in this early hour. I tuck corners, smooth lines, wish a blessing on the next guest before closing the door. 3. I drive away in a downpour, rain washing leaves off the windshield, blurring the abbey in the rear view. I navigate by reversing the way I came, checking for signs and landmarks. The white farmhouse kneeling by a field, pines in a circle, 12 of them like apostles. Later, a dead deer on the roadside, limbs taut, the rest gone slack, antlers crowning his head. Christ conjured, but not resurrected, just the sad animal of his body lifted from the cross. This 3rd poem is called Instructions to a Future Son. Before you become a fox, you must understand russet, burrow, and swift. Also gunsmoke and forest fire. Before you become a summer night, you will need not only dark or moon, but lawn and crickets and heat. To be an old house, you must practice secret keeping, know mahogany, stone, and the many names for loneliness. You must speak history, same as if you become a clock. Of course, you'll need time, but patience too, for the long silence between the hours. And before you become a leaf on a poplar tree, you must learn silver as well as green. You will need wind, quiver, and sometimes falling. You have already become a boy, imagined, but still all insect and sunflower, a little recklessness in your heels. To become a man, though, you must understand more, things you won't tell me or have language for. Thank you.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Reading poetry out loud from a wheelchair has taught me about filmmaking. Have you seen the first movie Star Wars, where the big ship is coming out? And that is what being in a wheelchair is when you're up here, because when I'm coming up, everyone's attention comes to me, I have everyone's undivided attention. And it's like, okay, I better perform. So if you're a professor or a performer or a hypnotist, just have a wheelchair because you'll have everyone looking at you, no matter what you're doing. All right. 2 days ago, I found a childhood friend had died. His name was Chad Henroyd, and I haven't seen him since I was 16 years old. So, God, over 20 years ago. And I had contacted him on Facebook after the death of his grandmother, and not really contact. We were in different places, and his politics are way. His posts, I didn't make me so mad. I would just hide them. And he was why I remember him. He was the only one when I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at 10 that treated me just like a normal kid. And I remember that, but you forget as your lives go by and you become two people and you become adults. And Facebook is the worst place to find out someone dies. It is so impersonal. So I went to poetry, because poetry is, people say, oh, poetry, everyone's doom and gloom, but it's not doom and gloom. Poetry is a perfect vehicle for human emotion, I think, and it's the only way to deal with trauma or love or passion. It's the vehicle for it. This is what it's made for. So I wrote this poem 2 days ago for him. It's called The Passing as the Shadows. When the shadow is fresh and crisp in the morning light, we marvel at its sharpness, doubting it will ever fade or foreshorten, but soon it leaves our memory in the passage of the day, the errands, the many pressing tasks, and we forget we ever had a shadow. It is only at dusk, when the sun is disappearing behind the mountains, that we recall it, welcome back our old friend. Then too soon it leaves us to be among the countless, but be at ease. It is not lost, only uniting in the great oneness of being. Thank you. And going down too. Thank you.
You're not going down, Isaac, you're bringing us up. So Isaac was talking about poetry group, and poetry group is something really important to me. So Isaac was there yesterday, and Brock was there, and Shannon was there. I'd been having this really emotional day, and my stomach was just, it was one thing after another all day long, and I didn't even have time to breathe, and things were just coming down. You know how the days are. And I just thought, man, I just need my mother. And I sat down 20 minutes before poetry group, and I wrote the poem, and thank God the poetry group said, yeah, that's... And I want to read this poem to you because Isaac read that poem to us, and what you said, Isaac, about poetry as a perfect vehicle for human emotion. We've got to use it, we've got to write it, and we've really got to share it. So I want to share this one with you. Letter after 20 years. Dear Mother, last night I walked down by the river grass at the edge and a path winding past the city park, the city where I lived as you were dying. You were dying again, this time in your own bed, but the bed was down by the river, brass headboard, rolling casters, white bedspread, soft as ripples over mossy banks. Juncos twittered and fluttered high, and the cottonwoods' white tail feathers flashing, white coverlet fluttering over your breast, your thin-boned breast, heart like a bird's heart. you were still there, outside, thin as air. Hovering, I felt like a heartbeat, nothing you could hold, but you reached out your hand, the years flowing by. Beside us, the water sang and rippled, flowing like the years, 20 years, and so many hard knocks to the heart since you died. But now it seems you haven't. You haven't died yet in any of my dreams. There you are often at the end of a hallway, arms open to me, or there in the shadows of trees, your smile, a half moon. Mirrored that smile rippling on water. I pretend you're whole and new, like a new moon we can't see though it's full and high and looking down, not dying. There in its bed of tall darkness, the story I wanted to tell you, my words trailing off down the river, decades, and you are still, so still there, listening. We have 4 more readers is all. Oh, hi, Erin. We're so glad you're here. You missed Isaac reading. It's good to have you here. Next we have, these are our final 4, Mia Jensen, Kylie Smith, and Adrian Thomson, and Andrew Romriell. Come on up one at a time.
Hi, my name is Mia Jensen. I'm going to be reading 2 pieces for you. The first one's pretty short. It's called Little Brother's Breakfast. The semi-cooked eggs quake off the spatula. Your amitriptyline tremors send the yellow glob to the burning pan. Sizzling cries as it lands. Your popcorn butter-stained Cinemark shirt swallows the smell of your 3 a.m. breakfast. Our Pomeranian Mario yelps as you seize on the couch. Your involuntary convulsions spill your frosted flakes. Milk seeps into the carpet. Your eyes immobilized in their sockets. Absent, distant, the only organ free from motion. No one taught you how to fry eggs. The amber yolk turning a tawny brown along the bottom of the pan, the sponged eggs now crispy flakes. You hang your head over the dish, hair absorbing the rising smoke. You slick your bleach-streaked hair away from your eyes. Your gnawed nails nick a white pimple the Accutane couldn't get. Mom, just getting home, drops the plastic Walmart bags and springs to your side. Mario's ears down, snout up, paces the milky wet carpet as Mom heaves your mangled pile of limbs into the car. When you get to the hospital, you can't remember a thing. You scrape the burnt crisps off the cast iron pan, escort the rubbery eggs onto a plastic plate. Mario paces the wooden floor, waiting for your food to land in his panting mouth. You smile, rub the sleep out of your eyes, and give a chunk of your overcooked egg to the dog. This other one is a little bit of a story I'm working on, just a couple of pages. I could explain it, but I think it's funnier when people don't understand. You will understand, but it's funnier. It doesn't have a title yet. Alberic knew it would take more than just one swing. The criminal knelt beneath Alberic's feet, rope-bound, eyes clenched. He chanted prayers and superstitions. His neck coiled, exposing the vertebrae Alberic would wedge his blade between. The criminal was stout, bulky, too thick for Alberic's second-hand blade. A large group gathered beneath the platform the 2 men ascended upon. Clad in brown and gray garments, the group marveled at the scene, their eyes fixed upon the axe, waiting for the incision. Beads of sweat seeped through Alberic's wool mask. He peeked through the sloppy eye holes of the crowd, then back to the criminal's neck. The hilt fiddled in Alberic's hand, the blade hanging limp in the air. He inhaled, launching the hilt above the criminal's head. The crowd leaned forward, eyes bulging, arms extending. Heaving his arms forward, the axe fell upon the quivering man, landing in the base of his neck. The crowd lunged over one another in a frenzy. They elbowed and shoved their peers, hoping to get a taste of the fresh corpse. Their rush was silenced by blood-infused wheezes of the criminal. The axe halted halfway down the neck, a crimson trail dripping into the wooden platform. Albrecht tugged the blade out of the man's neck and frantically swung until the head splashed into the puddle of blood. The crowd plowed their way into the platform, eyes fixed upon the decapitated criminal. Albrecht released the axe, picked up the lifeless head, and faced the crowd. Aghast, they stepped away from the platform and hobbled to their knees. An elderly woman with an exposed scalp crept to her bone arms up the platform and wrapped her fingers around Albrecht's boot. Her small frame shook as she sobbed, "Please, please, just a drop. That's all I ask." Albrecht smiled underneath his charcoal hood. He was overcome by a wave of pride as tears fled the woman's eyes. One after another, people leapt out of the crowd and fell upon Albrecht's feet. "I beg of you, allow me one drink," one pled. Another said, "Oh, please, while the blood is still pure, would you spare my life and give me one drop?" Still smiling, Albrecht tipped the head upside down to stop the blood. The motionless eyes hazed over the scene. Albrecht felt the desperation of the crowd. He marveled in it. His heart swelled, scanning the crowd. He held the decapitated head close to his chest and searched the beggars below. His cloaked eyes found the tears of the balding woman again. Albrecht didn't know many of the villagers, but he remembered seeing her at the previous execution. She had begged him to rid her face of boils by draping the corpse's hand across her skin. The boils still oozed from her discolored cheeks. She needed something stronger than away from the dead. Heavy pants exuded from the crowd in low gasps. Albrecht cradled the head in his arms and took a small bowl from his blood-stained trousers. His callous fingers wrung the blood from the detached head into the bowl. Peering along his patients, none stood out to him like the woman. She shook, the involuntary convulsions rocking the pus from her boils. Head still under Albrecht's arm, he kneeled eye to eye with the woman and handed her the blood bowl. She drank. Stuttering lips sloshed the blood, flinging droplets as she slurped. "Bless you," she whispered, blood masking the yellow of her teeth. Albrecht's smile persisted under the woven fabric of his hood. The woman returned the bowl, exposing blood fingerprints along the wooden curve. Albrecht let the bowl fall into his gloved hands. The peasant's silence echoed through the village. The sound of the blood dispensing neck was combated only by the mucus-filled wheezes of the crowd. They waited as Albrecht decided who deserved healing. Beheadings were complicated. They required a level of efficiency and precision. Hangings, on the other hand, were a simple matter. Albrecht had to do nothing more than graze the hand of the fresh corpse across the infected area. Albrecht still dictated who could and could not receive the living touch, of course. They rushed to his side, singing songs of praise and adoration, hoping he had the benevolence to run their rash against the pulseless palm. Unfortunately, the touch of the finger is nothing compared to fresh blood in the mouth. Albrecht frantically squeezed the blood from the head and held the bowl over his head. "Who's next?" he boomed, even through the muffled mask. The crowd clawed and punched their way to the front, a scene Albrecht lusted after. A cloud of dirt wafted through the crowd from their desperate skiffs. Albrecht's heart pulsed inside his broad ribs. His eyes widened, sweat beat off his nipples, and the frenzy began. He handed the bowl to one peasant with a crippled hand, refilled the bowl, and bestowed it upon one with infected eyesore. Refill. Then someone whose lips reached to kiss his boot. Refill. To someone who just yelled his name the loudest. Refill, 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 until a small chime filled the air. The only clock in the village always rang 1 hour after an execution. At the sound of the chime, a unison groan broke out amongst the peasants, and they strode away. "Maybe next time," a mother told her small child covered in boils. "Wait," Albrecht cried, "there's still plenty for all of you." Albrecht wrenched blood loose from the flesh and caught it in the bowl. He rushed off his pedestal towards the child. He stooped to his knees and gestured the bowl to the child. "Here," Albrecht urged, peeling off his mask, exposing his tawny hair. A crazed smile etched into those hazel eyes. "Just for you, I saved it just for you." The kid shrugged away, making a sour face. Albrecht's breath became short and his smile retreated. "Oh no, it's okay, look," he gestured to the bowl. "Look, this is what you need." As his last remark, the boy's mother stepped in, scowling down at him. "Now don't you be filling his head with nonsense. You know as well as I, the spirit has already fled the blood. Drinking cow piss would sure cure him just as much as that spoiled blood. Now get out of my way." And she ushered her child away from Albrecht. Albrecht sat in the dirt and couldn't keep his eyes off the bloody bowl. The crowd dispersed within minutes, leaving him alone, save the dead. He sat in the dirt under the pedestal and stirred the blood with his finger. She was right, he thought. This blood is no good. No good for the little boy or the old balding woman. Alberic's shoulders shrunk as he sighed. Guilt swam through Alberic like snake venom. He put the mask over his fist and held it in front of his face, the eyeless slits looking back at him. He hated what he saw, hated the person he was when he wore it, hated the mask was all the people could see. Alberic shoved it in his pocket and stood up. Without hesitation, he hoisted the headless body over his shoulder, snatched the decapitated head by the hair, and walked home. The end.
Okay, this is just a short poem. A sorry, when it's easy to forgive. You can remember all the scars and court them. Ask them to dance. Bring them inside and warm them by the fire, knowing they too would not be there if they had a choice. That they are still, lonely, cold, ruptured skin, confused about how they got undone, and in letting them be, you let the body be, let their bodies be, held. Behold, I am. We are yours too.
Hello, I'm Adrian Thomson, and I grew up through two canyons. It's an hour and a half away through the mountains, but it's geographically exactly 30 miles from my house to the Shopko parking lot, which you won't be able to say for too much longer because Shopko no longer exists there. So that's a reference that's going to be lost. But this last summer was basically the first summer that I spent at least about 75% of the time away from home, so without going back full time. So during that time I wrote a series of poems about my hometown. And the first part of it is called Recites, and that's what this falls under. And instead of talking about the people, I talk about the animals. So this is called sage grouse. Sage grouse, dumb thing, clotheslines itself on barbed wire fences while flying and slices itself in half. Crosses highway by walking, will not move when a car is coming, even if it stops and waits for it to move. It's someone's job to count them, drive the draws until 4 fat gray chickens flutter up, or 5 or 6, and then wonder in the dusk if they saw a 7th. Crows eat their eggs, unhidden in brush, where females hunker down like tiny hills, and the males, long after the season is over, stand out in the flats and continue to clack their bright, ample bosoms. Dad says he's seen such a display southwest of town up above Higgins Hollow, right where it drops down into Sage Hollow before it leads up 1,000 Mile Ridge. But I have never seen it, despite living for 20 years less than 20 miles away. Once, Dad says, he was on the committee to count them, went to the meeting at the BLM sheds, where the big-booted, high-to-do wildlife researchers leaned against their porch railing in a Stetson they'd bought that day, making a series of phone calls to recruit the locals for a few hours. They looked at him odd when Dad said he had seen some up Higgins Hollow, just above Sage Hollow, that had flown up 1,000 Mile Ridge, and they told him to meet at the junction the next night at 8 p.m. The next night, 8 miles north of town, the counters congregated, told the researchers they'd seen 4 up Pole Canyon, 2 in Old Canyon, 6 in New Canyon, 1 in Dry Canyon, dead. And Dad told them he had seen 24 sage chickens, he calls them, 22 hens, and 2 roosters. The men stared at him with their shoe-polished mustaches and clacked the tops of their clipboard clips closed, drove off. White plastic tags now run down the fence line above Sage Hollow into Higgins Hollow, where the fence goes up 1,000 Mile Ridge for them to see as they spurt upwards and fly away from the counting trucks, but their numbers still plummet, like their droppings, shine droplets of tar drip down out of a dark winter sky. So this next one is part 2 of the series, which is called Recreation. So this one's called Hunting. Up at Chuck's when I am 8, in pine trees, with Dad in camper. His hunting buddy parked next to us in converted camping school bus. Green cloth shades of deer and ducks in windows. A table, a stove, a sink, and beds next to the blue seats inside. Smell of sleeping bags in firelight. Eating s'mores made on the stove. Sitting at table telling ancient stories of elk. Wearing red and black wool coat, walking up through forest draws in light dew morning, dark, smelling quake and aspen earth, asking Dad if it's normal to breathe this hard, feel my heartbeat go this fast. Dad sets up big bear trap for giant pack rat, foot long, fat, comes in at night, tears garbage up, baits trap with half a Milky Way, sets trap above wooden ramp on opposite end of tailgate. That night in camper, we eat pork and beans. I described to Dad the SpongeBob episode where they go camping. We sleep, me hugging his warm, barrel-chested form. I wake up, hear the small stream gurgle in the woods behind us. Outside, a rat crawls up the ramp, curious, trots along the tailgate, smells the candy, reaches trap, snap! But it doesn't work. He's only caught, thrashes, clangs the metal trap, clang, clang, clang against the tailgate. Dad's buddy wakes up, stumbles out, grabs shovel next to toilet log, raises shovel blade above his head, brings the blunt end crashing down. Breaks shovel, breaks trap, kills rat, back to sleep. Stream keeps gurgling away all night.
Hey guys, I'm Andrew. I haven't been here in 2 years, just about. I moved to Florida after my undergrad, and while there, ended up ending a 6.5-year relationship to a man that I still love. And I wasn't able to write for a long time. And coming back to school, I finally found that voice again. And so I'm going to read 2 poems that I've written over the past couple weeks as I try to formulate this new person in life that I have now. This first one is based on a conversation I had with my therapist that ended up leading me into realizing that I was gay. So it's called I Like to Sweep. He asked me why I hate myself. I don't, I say. I don't. But he had plucked the question from the warm air ringing with silence. I like to sweep, I tell him. Sweep these things through the cracks of closet doors. I like to hide them there so that the dismantling we do in therapy doesn't have to include me. He asked me, do you love yourself? Of course. Of course. Another pluck. Why? And through warm silence, I choke on fragmented utterances of because I do, because I have to, say I do. He knew that glass frames shatter so easily that mere words can break them, and if my glasses tip from the windowsill, I won't bother to puzzle fragments back together. I would have told him I'm broken, shards piercing me daily, and he would have already known. But silence is thick, and warm air holds us in place, weeping, transcending. The second one, and the last one, the only thing you really have to know is that one of my main things is I was born during the same time as Hurricane Andrew, even though it was miles away, and my parents didn't know that they had just named me after a hurricane. But it kind of ends up coming up as a theme a lot in my writing. So this one is called For the Boy Named Hurricane. Hurricane, don't be silent. Don't be afraid. Shout, scream. Vortex in a swirl of broken pens and torn pages, waterlogged and innumerable. Hurricane, you're okay. Your chipped mouth only feels broken because you do. Your body is beautiful, constructed piece by traumatized piece. You puzzled yourself back together. You showed up. You showed up. You looked at a stranger in the mirror and broke it. Bloody knuckles, broken spirit, cracked knees on bathroom tiles. You wept, you transcended. And through God-graced trauma you lived. You can breathe now, Hurricane, and later. You don't have to hold on to air. I know you think it hurts to spread your lungs, but that's only because you don't believe the universe can fill them. You don't believe these rainbow flags stand for you, but they do. They stand for fallen, broken, healed. They stand for you, Hurricane, and those cries you hear are really more like piano keys plucking away a tune you must choose to hear. And I know you hear them. I know you believe. You walk alone only until you look up. The galaxies shine down on you, the suns drop gold on your forehead, face glistening crystal from marvel and wonder. You'll ride this out, Hurricane, and when you do, this glitter, this streamer, this star-spun parade full of human dance, well, Hurricane, you'll find your dancing too. Thank you.
Thank you, open mic readers. Give yourselves a hand, give each other a hand for reading open mic. And let's give Rob another hand and go back and buy a book.